Transport Agency funding issues, DC 76. It will be spoken to by Christine Jones and Claire Cassidy. So they'll speak to it and then we'll take questions.
So perhaps if we just work through elements of the report. So as you'll recall, the Urban Performance Transport Committee received a report on this on the 12th of March and asked the Chief Executive to report back. He is in Auckland today, so unable to speak to this matter, but he has engaged directly with the Acting Director of Regional Relationships of NZTA. It's been clear from those conversations and from correspondence that we've received from the Interim Chief Executive that these are national issues, not local or regional. Where the correspondence makes it clear that further funding approvals won't be made until they have assessed the total situation in terms of the total funding requests across New Zealand nationally, and also does acknowledge that local authorities have been seeking clarity on this matter for some time. So this is the first correspondence that we've received. So it's clear that nothing will change in sort of that 2-week time frame, given it is a national issue. We understand it's more likely to be April or possibly even into May before there is some clarity. In the report, we've given an update on a number of other matters. The work happening in terms of business case continues, and we're noting there that that is difficult. NZTA processes do mean, or what we're experiencing are changes in direction partway through processes, rework and slippages. We have an increase in concern that the amount of time and costs associated with business cases in some instances are becoming disproportional to the value of the projects, and we will discuss some of those matters a bit more in confidential later. We have raised these concerns with NZTA staff, and I have a meeting in just over a week's time with the Funding Investment Manager of NZTA based in Wellington to work through those matters with her. You'll recall that there is a TFAR subsidy, which is an enhanced FAR rate of 75% as opposed to our standard 51%. There had previously been no clarity around the processes that were required to apply for TFAR. Recently we have received a letter from NZTA saying we can apply. However, the total funding pool, the total pool of funds available for each council will not increase. So you will get TFAR on some projects, you'll have to remove others, and in total the amount of subsidy is not changed. So that announcement has been received in the last week, and so we're including it for your information as well. We have had some conversations with the Regional Council on this issue of funding. They have said that they would be willingly to consider to take on the risk where NZTA funding is unknown due to the issues associated with the FAR subsidy. We have provided them a list with the projects that are at risk. None of those projects are solely PT funded related. We try to achieve multiple objectives in projects, including safety, renewals, walking and cycling, and PT. There are not that many projects that are solely a PT outcome. That doesn't meet what they are looking for in terms of reprioritisation or funding support. We've also written to NZTA around Te Ariki West. That is another project that's been caught up in this re-evaluation and funding shortage issue. NZTA has approved $35,000 to do some transport modelling and some limited ecological and project management work. But the other pieces of work that are critical to us being able to progress the plan change, including assessing interim access options for transport, looking at the connections to the Te Ariki business estate, looking at the future of Belt Road and the ring route, and assessing multimodal options. Those funding for all those parts of the investigations have been suspended by NZTA. We have written to NZTA and offered to fund $100,000 so that that project can continue given the high priority, and that offer has been accepted. And correspondence attached to that, related to that, is in your agenda. And similarly, in terms of the Urban Form and Transport Initiative, again a project of high priority, we are needing to go through the NZTA procurement processes, and the strong direction and a resolution that was passed at the Smart Growth meeting was to continue with phase 2, noting that there may need to be some funding where the subsidy is unable to be secured. So there's a resolution to this report just noting those two elements where the council is stepping in where needed to ensure progress of the priority areas. In terms of the issues, just in terms of option 3, it should read deliver projects that already have been tendered with awarded contracts not signed, because sometimes there's a delay between awarding and signing, and we can speak to those specific matters more in the confidential section. So happy to take any questions.
Noting that we plan to move A to receive the report, there will be a new A, leave B to lie on the table, and we'll look at C as well. But first we have some questions from Councillor Baldock.
Yes, thanks, Christine. If I can just refer to paragraph 10, and in some ways paragraph 11 too, about the regional council's offer to underwrite the 51% of NZTA funding. Where would that money come from as far as the regional council is concerned?
Our understanding from discussions with the regional council is if that risk were to eventuate, they would look to fund that from a targeted rate from the Tauranga community. So it's very generous. So are they thinking maybe they're trying to help us out with our debt ratios in this situation? Or? Our understanding from the conversations that we've had is they are looking to fast track some of the infrastructure, PT infrastructure, and we're concerned that that may be slowed down because of the funding issues that we're experiencing. As I said, we've provided them with a full list of the projects which have elements of PT in them but are not solely PT. We have identified that it would make sense for us to do the separate report, which is in paragraph 11. I think in some respects there's some misunderstanding in terms of some of the PT projects where Tauranga City Council has them in the LTP, which years and when they're proposed to be delivered. So we think it would be helpful to identify all of the projects, identify the status of those projects and how some of them need data and information and certainty in terms of the route review prior to this council being in, or staff being in a position to recommend to council investments. So it's a mix of projects that we're currently proceeding with, implementing investments that have been made in PT, some that are reliant on the review, and some which are substantive investments in the multi-millions and need a really well-considered issues and options, but also a significant amount of community engagement before we can put that infrastructure in place.
But a grant from, the likes of a windfall special dividend from the port, from the regional council to us, would be well received, I think, because it wouldn't be putting the burden on our joint ratepayers, would it?
Correct. So the reason the council passed the resolution last week was that the intention was try to ensure that NZTA picked up its share of the costs via the subsidy mechanism, and I think the Mayor spoke about that around, this community has paid its petrol taxes, etc., which all go into the National Fund, and as part of that there was an expectation that those funds would flow back to this community to support transport projects.
And as far as you as the General Manager, you're clear on our instructions as to proceed with that infrastructure for the PT blueprint as fast as possible, but only after proper analysis and investigation that it's money well spent.
Correct, and Claire can speak. She's going to talk this Friday at the PT committee. Perhaps we'll just cover what you've just given a quick overview.
Yeah, so through the chair, we have a regular slot now at the PT committee giving an update on where we're at with all of our PT infrastructure projects, particularly those related to the blueprint, but there are others on our books as well. So that will be on Friday this week.
Question from me. If there's been a lot of discussion around it's dysfunctional with one council looking after the service and the other the infrastructure. So at what point in time do we have that conversation that maybe one of those councils looks at the infrastructure? Are we jumping the gun when there is a possibility further down the track?
I mean, that's a conversation that can be had between elected members. The infrastructure is on the Roding corridor, and so I I would think that it makes logical sense for the road controlling authority, which is Tauranga City Council in this case, to have responsibility for the PT infrastructure. In terms of the service, I think there's a conversation that you could have with your regional council colleagues.
Councillor Granger, you had a question?
Thanks, Christine. Just in regards to their underwrite of 51%, and I see that it's just referring to the interchanges, shelters and bus lanes, and I see that the stages of 1 and 1A 15th Ave is not included, although it's including bus lanes, which is very, very important through the middle of the city. Any idea why? Or is that just the case? It's just PT only?
I'll clarify with Martin. My understanding is 1 and 1A are not the actual bus lanes. They're in 2. 1 and 1A are the improvements to the intersections to enable traffic flow, which will include PT, but it's not solely for PT. And the Regional Council, have I got that right? Martin's nodding, so I've got that right. Regional Council is looking to invest in projects that are solely passenger transport.
But the 1 and 1A certainly does improve the traffic flow, which is including buses as well.
That is correct.
Any further questions, comments?
Point of clarification, if I may, because I'm happy to move, but you said we will move A, then go into confidential, are we, and then coming back out, or?
We look at what's on the board. Our plan is to look at moving A and C, and then we'll leave B to lie on the table because we have a confidential session at the end of this. So we'll have a discussion on that then, and then come back out into open and look at approving and passing recommendation B. So if you're happy to move A and C.
Happy to move A and C, yeah.
Okay, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Kurek. Speaking to it, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I think this is the right response at the moment with what's going on. It's interesting to see how it is being presented by NZTA now as a national problem. Basically, they're running out of money. The idea that we could have this, extended far rate for projects of cycling and public transport, and of course a lot of that into Auckland, is draining the funds. And they were perhaps a little unprepared for the response. I know we as a council took the opportunity to treble our budget on cycleways because this is a good opportunity. But without boring my colleagues, I'll just mention that when I was in Parliament and the transport spokesman for United Future, I made frequent speeches about how we used to rob the National Land Transport Fund for decades, since it was ever set up. The money was taken out of it, or just wasn't put into it really, robbed by the general fund. And if you wanted to go back and look at Hansard, you see how many times I raised it. Finally, the government began to actually ring fence that funding from motorists and use it for transport projects. But now, and that's why we got some big roads of national significance funded through the years of 2005 through to 15, but now in a different way it's being robbed again. I don't think motorists are opposed to contributing something to assist with cycle lanes and public transport because there is an impact upon congestion and so on, but the way it is now it's halting important roading projects, and we're feeling it here. As we know, we've debated this many times with our housing development and with the congestion we have in our city. So I think we need to get the message through that when motorists pay fuel tax, especially the amount of fuel tax we pay, and the GST on fuel as well, that it's time motorists got a fair deal with that money being used to alleviate the congestion on the roads. I know the argument all the time, you can't build your way out of congestion with roads. Well, I disagree. If we could invest $2 to $3 billion in this city on some grade separation of many of our congested spots, we would make very good projects. Of course, we want to at the same time be promoting public transport, and any idea the Regional Council has that we are dragging our feet and not supporting this is wrong. We are doing all we can, just that the terrible start to the public transport blueprint has us thinking about how well it was designed, and we need to be careful when we spend ratepayers' money that it's going to be delivering for them the kind of service they want. So I'll leave my remarks there.
Councillor Kurek.
I assume that now we'd have to consider adding B that lays on the table. Is that what we're looking at on the board? If so, I'm happy. The mover is. Oh, there's been a change there. We've just moved A and C, haven't we, at this stage? Do we have to move B?
That's later. After you've done the answer.
Okay. And speaking to it, in terms of Councillor Baldock's comments around the balance between providing for motorists via roads and to get some modal shift, no matter what we think, currently the NZTA board feels, or actually the staff, because it never went to the board, our Tauranga Transport Program, feel that Tauranga hasn't gone far enough, and so that's where it is. You know, that's the reality of the situation. So we need to work with NZTA to ensure that we do cross that line to enable some funding to come to Tauranga to support our local roading projects. I mean, that's just the reality. I think looking at option 3 here, it's the balanced way forward. We've got to move on with our critical roading infrastructure, and particularly those that are currently been through the tender process or in train. So I look forward to some discussion around some further detail on that in the confidential section, and I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I mean, I certainly do appreciate personally the generous offer of the Regional Council. However, as has been pointed out by my colleagues, really it is robbing Peter to pay Paul, because our Tauranga residents would still pay through their regional rate as opposed to the Tauranga City Council rates, which coincidentally are on the same invoice that goes out to everybody. So the sum total at the bottom, people wouldn't notice any difference. The problem sits squarely with the government, and there is a perplexing set of behaviour around transport and housing, whereby there's a lot of talk about the need for housing and how previous governments have failed to deliver housing and opening up land for housing and building housing. And yet the funding to be able to deliver the roads that are required for that housing and the upgrades to existing roads which are required for that housing is somehow missing in a disorganised organisation that the NZTA is at this time. They've got some fine people working for them, but unfortunately the Jekyll and Hyde leadership of the Housing Minister and Transport Minister is making communities up and down the country suffer with their transport needs.
Councillor Robson.
Just clarification, C, is there an error in the writing there? Should it not say Tauriko Network Connections Detailed Business Case and the Urban Form and Transport Initiative? We seem to have the word transport and in there. That will be corrected, one assumes. Thank you. Second thing, I think my councillor Steve Morris spoke in error. They are not robbing Peter to pay Paul. They are robbing Peter to pay Peter. Even more nonsensical. I do support the motion. However, there are two levels, significant levels of dysfunction in our transport system that are not within our gift to solve, but we must put in the public space. Right? One is, as Councillor Morris has pointed out, the dysfunction in central government and the consequential impacts it has, I believe, on NZTA. I think some of their staffing problems may be because people can no longer live in that Kafkaesque situation that's been created by central government's policy conflicts. The second nonsensical situation is the situation we have here with the road controlling authority not controlling the public transport system. It is a nonsense, and I would make the very clear observation that should we take control of our bus system, the millions of dollars of revenue that currently support it
I can't remember the exact numbers. Someone will correct me if I'm out by an order of magnitude, but a few $1 million in rates, a few $1 million in fares, and then some money from general taxation. Nothing I point from the Port of Tauranga or the local regional council. That money would not only, I think, be better spent and better managed by us in terms of providing a bus system that complemented the needs of the city, but it would also, in terms of revenue, probably solve our debt revenue ratio issue. Right? Because we have a wooden dollar situation at the moment where revenue passes to regional council, not passing through us. It would change substantively some of the financial constraints we're under from LGFA. So there are a number of solutions in place here that are unfortunately not within our gift, but certainly within the gift of central government if they come to their senses, in terms of not just their policy, but in terms of how they structure the relationships between regional councils and territorial authorities like ourselves.
Go to Councillor Mason and then to Councillor Baldock for right of reply.
Yeah, just following on some of those themes. That the regional council has, for many years, flown under the radar in terms of local politics and resourcing. This particular triennium, especially with the public transport in relation to the buses, was meant to roughly double the bus provision and has not gone right. There are a lot of issues around that. We know that. So I think people are starting to realise that what the regional council's power and influence and funding is all about, and also I think that if there was a targeted rate, they would have to go to consultation about that, and so that would again raise the profile of the of what the regional council is doing and can do, and it can contribute to the wider good in this part of the sub-region. So potentially some good things happening here, and definitely we don't want the wider public doesn't need the regional council to fly under the radar anymore. They've got to see the opportunities that the regional council and its assets provide to the wider community.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Councillor Robson, and as we've often joked, when the two of us agree, someone's in trouble. So perhaps the regional council needs to think about this. If I'm fortunate to be returned to this table next year, I certainly will be pursuing that taking over of the responsibility. It is a simple function for regional council to transfer its responsibilities to us. It's part of the Local Government Act, can be done. Just finally, with my seconder for the motion, Councillor Kirak, yes, clearly NZTA are saying we haven't gone far enough with our Tauranga transport issue, but I think that's just playing games, really. I think we had gone far enough. I think there was nothing wrong with our proposals there, and I believe it's time to stand our ground. It's clear that this is an issue of funding, and they're just playing these games now to try and fob off our things. The reason we should stand our ground is so that we cannot solve our problems with mode shift. We have the port here. No other city in this country has the country's largest port here, and we have a wall of wood coming from the north. It's been talked about for years. We now know we've got a tsunami of bottled water coming from Karea. 500 trucks a day, they're telling us, are coming from one of these bottling plants, yes, to the port for export. And even if they get it on trains, that doesn't solve the problem. So we have to stand our ground, say, look, we need what we need for the city, and the motorists of the city have a right to see that tax money they pay at the pump every time they fill up. I must say, with my new hybrid plug-in Prius, I don't pull into the pump as much as I used to, which is wonderful, but I feel for everybody else who is still doing so. We need to fix our city. That's what we're elected to do.
Thank you, councillors. So that's DC 76, moved by Councillor Baldock, seconded by Councillor Kirak. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? And carried. Thank you. Signalling that we will be going past 12 o'clock because we want to give these general managers' reports the time that they deserve. So the first up we have is General Manager of Community Services. This report is being presented by Margaret Batchelor, Acting General Manager for Community Services. There are 7 headings to this paper, and she'll speak briefly to them, then we'll take some questions. Please keep your questions short and sweet. Thank you, Margaret.
Good morning, councillors. I'm pleased to deliver the first General Manager report for Community Services. Across the 7 activities in the Community Services Group, I'd like to talk about 3 or 4 highlights over the last few months in terms of what's been happening operationally by way of an introduction to this report. Bay Court was awarded a gold ranking by Qualmark recently, the only arts venue in New Zealand to receive such a ranking. This is the New Zealand tourism industry's official quality assurance award. And what it means for Bay Court is that it has the potential to raise the profile for Bay Court, making the business more visible to promoters and event organisers, and hopefully more appealing when they are choosing a venue. The award also promotes Tauranga to visitors, as the gold ranking is included in tourist information and guides. Continuing on with Bay Court, work is underway to establish a regional consortium of venues between Bay Court, Hamilton Theatre and the Hawke's Bay Opera House in partnership. This is primarily a way of increasing the buying power of the 3 venues, which may also lead to shared cost savings across such things as production and freight and marketing. Moving on to community development. One of the highlights for the team there this month has been the Safer Communities program. The Safer Communities program for the region hosted its first professional development conference in the Bay of Plenty, focusing on family harm. The conference was 5 months in the making and a collaborative project between New Zealand Police and family violence response coordinators. The Western Bay of Plenty is the highest region in New Zealand for reported family harm incidents. So the aim of the conference was to educate and provide information on those subjects that are increasingly impacting on family violence incidents throughout New Zealand. The conference included presentations from the Chief Censor on youth viewing online pornography. There were presentations from the police on drug harm in the community, and a variety of other speakers, including those talking on strangulation and sexual violence and other topics. There were 400 attendees across a range of different workplaces in the Bay, so a high attendance. In the library runs an array of summer holiday reading programs. These sessions are always popular and in demand. This year, you'll see that in the report that there were different programs run for primary school age, for tweens, can't remember exactly what tweens are, but tweens, teenagers and adults. The programs for the various ages saw over 1,000 people attending the reading programs, including 130 adults. Outside the reading programs, the library runs a variety of other programs, including reading programs in schools, after-school book clubs, and a variety of community and digital programs. Over 3,800 people attended all of these programs and on offer between January and February this year. Record numbers for these summer programs. And for the parks team, summer is the time that a lot of work takes place on our various parks and reserves. You'll see in the report information about new or realigned tracks, reconstruction at Blake Park rugby fields, the phenomenal visitor numbers at McLaren's Falls with 16,000 visitors in January alone, and the parks team's successful efforts to eradicate the golden mealybug at Sydenham Botanic Park. I particularly liked the story about the golden mealybug, as once the parks teams were advised of this, it took them some time to identify what it was, what the bug was, to research it and then decide the best methodology to control the bug. But once they had the answer, they were able to successfully save the 95 trees there. And I think that's possibly one of the success stories that we may not hear about that much. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Robson?
Yeah, with regard to the library figures, currently 290,000 physical items. I don't know how many of those are actually books. I'd be interested in that. In January and February, 252,000 books were issued. At any given time, how many books are actually on issue? Because, I mean, looking at those figures, one could possibly imagine empty shelves in the library, at any given time, how many books are actually on issue?
Sorry, thank you, John. The last time we did a something that runs that figure, which is not one that we do every month, it's around about 60 to 70,000 books are out of the library at any one time.
We are going to try and take these page by page. Councillor Stewart, I'm aware you've got a question, but do you want to jump in when we get to that page? So first of all, page 11, we've got Bay Court. So I'll just go through them. Catherine?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. On page 11, I was wondering if staff could send us an idea of the events, just whether they made money or lost money, just and also how much it cost for our New Year events. If sometime that could be emailed or put in the next report, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Margaret's going to take care of that. Any more questions on Bay Court?
Could I ask if the, rather than just asking about whether they made money or didn't make money, if we could surround that with what the actual outcomes were in a broader context? Not everything is about money, whether we make it or not. Thank you.
It's noted. Thank you. Over the page to CCO management. City events, which we've briefly touched on there with 215 events for December to February. And the event delivery. Events will be coming back to us with a full report on the event funding framework once they've finished the first year of that funding round. So page 16, community development. Through to historic village.
Community development, it goes over to 7 or 18 even. The funding, I would like just a very brief one-page report on the summary of the process taken to allocate that $80,000, please, if that is possible through the chair.
Thank you. That's noted. So it was 40,000 to Awhenua House and 40,000 to People's Project. So historic village.
Chair, historic village.
Yep, just want to question on the numbers there with that one, Margaret. But on line 50, just there's a typo, but if we can just, I'm presuming it's 18,000 for user numbers, if that can be confirmed. Councillor Stewart has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the historic village, and I note there's been a challenge with the tourism buses being able to find parks down at the historic village, and it's not the first time I've heard the comment through our city about parking buses, and I just wonder through the chair to perhaps Martin Parks whether their department's done some analysis or is planning to do some analysis in this regard.
We've been working with the Regional Council on the potential to provide more bus parking within the locality of the Willow Street area. That only kicked off early this week, so we've still got a bit more work to do in that space. We'd be interested to hear from tour operators with regards to their requirements. They've never approached us in the past, so if they have an issue, we would like to hear about it, and we'd certainly investigate any concerns.
Councillor Granger, you have a question on Historic Village?
Hey, thank you. I just want to go back a little. Something's just come up in regards to the libraries, Margaret. Just a question I do want to ask. I understand, no doubt, we're in contact with many other libraries through other cities throughout New Zealand, in general.
I don't know if you can speak to that.
Is there a question?
You are, yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, you are. Tough question, but I do want to ask it. Is there any that you know of that may charge a small subsidy on the books?
Yes, there are very few councils that do charge a book borrowing fee. Cambridge and Te Awamutu is one that does, and they have for a long time, but their issues are much lower than other similar sized libraries.
Thanks for that, and as small as they are, they seem to be operating okay.
Is that they're operating okay? I guess.
Very short answer.
I guess we don't really have any understanding of how Te Awamutu and Cambridge libraries are operating, but interesting, there are some that do charge fees. Councillor Baldock, you had a question on Historic Village, so we're back to page 18.
Yeah, thanks. Just clarifying that line 50, isn't it just the comma is in the wrong place? It is 186,000 for the year, isn't it? Not 18.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. Just in regard to the hop-on, hop-off on bus, I was there a few weeks ago, and there is a problem with the bus from the cruise ships when it comes on a Sunday that isn't a market day. And I just wondered if we could have a chat to people down there, because they're opening up to serve that bus, and usually when there's no market there's sort of only a few people get off, and so maybe the scheduling could be looked at to try and work that in better with the businesses that are down there. Could I just pass that on?
I'm happy to raise that with them, thank you.
So moving on, emergency management. Page 20, libraries, which we've discussed. Parks and recreation. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, just like to check with staff if we're making provision for trees with sunshade in mind. Is there anyone from Parks and Reserves?
Through the chair, I don't have anyone from Parks here today, but happy to come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Baldock.
Just in regard to that good news story about the golden mealybug, you may have already, but could I just ask if a note of thanks and congratulations to the Sydenham Park Botanic Park Advisory Group, because if they hadn't picked it up quickly, it could have been really devastating, as you said.
I'll check with the team if something's been said. If not, we'll make sure something happens.
Councillor Robson.
I don't know whether this qualifies as a park, but Te Papa Ona Manu Porotakataka, Councillor Leanne Brown's favourite amenity. I saw on recent visits to the site, accompanied by members of the community, that there's a promise that 4 large trees will soon be planted in that place. Can someone give me some guidance as to whether we are planting large trees or whether we are planting small trees that one day will be large? It's a serious question.
Through the chair, I'll come back to you on that.
Could I just suggest that we take questions on that as part of the corporate services report? That project actually spoken to in there.
Thank you, Paul. So any further questions in general? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 26 is reference to upcoming Parks and Recreation Cameron Road new park development. Doesn't say what part of Cameron Road, so I think I know, but I just want confirmation. Is it the Gate Par one, or?
As far as I know, it's Gate Par, but I'm happy to check and come back to you.
Be quite nice, perhaps, for elected members to do a site visit out that way, if that's available.
Yep, I can arrange that. Thank you.
I just thought, well done to the staff on the, it's not on here, but the cycleway up Kopu Valley. I think that's a fantastic asset. It's, and well done. Thank you.
Thank you. So staff have got a number of issues to come back to us on around events and New Year's Eve, around the funding for the community, for Awhina House and People's Project, talk to some tour operators around the buses, and perhaps organise some site visits. So if there are no further questions, I will call for a mover and seconder for this. So it is going to be moved by Councillor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Mason. Speaking to that, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say that it's so great to see the Project Services and Operations Committee back here, where we get the opportunity to be updated on all these projects. It's just part of what we should have been doing, and it was rather unfortunate that this triennium it never incorporated that from day one. So just to say how much it's valued and appreciated, the opportunity to ask questions on what's going on in our community on behalf of the ratepayers who fund most of these things.
Well said, and we'll all agree with that. Councillor Mason?
Yeah, I absolutely concur with Councillor Stewart. It really is what we should have been doing for the last 2 years. Really felt a lack, but now it really is like a window into the community, these reports. So it's just fantastic. You know, any one of us can walk down the street, you know, stop somebody. Somebody will stop us and say, "Oh, how's it going?" And you know, how about this one particular issue they might have or whatever. We can instantly say to them, "Got the update?" You can pull it out of your pocket or whatever it might be. You know, you can speak with authority on anything at any one time. It really is good value. So thank you to all the staff who've been involved in planning it and executing. So great, well done.
There's no further discussion. DC 62, moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Mason. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Margaret. We'll now move through to the General Manager of Infrastructure report, which will be presented by Martin Parks. So Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to introduce the first General Manager Infrastructure report to this new committee. Before I start, it's obviously a new type of report, so if we're missing something, then obviously please let us know in due course. If there's stuff you don't like in it, let us know. If there's stuff you want to see in it, please let us know. So some of the things I'd probably like to point out in the report are we did the flood hazard mapping exercise around Buretta on the 21st of March. I understand there wasn't too much engagement, but some people did turn up, so see the information got out. Water restrictions have been lifted, which is it's a good news story. That happened yesterday, so that's gone out to the wider community. As the Chair has already pointed out, the glass collection, curbside glass collection, is going extremely well. We're receiving a lot of tonnage through that, and the community are really buying into that very, very well. The LED streetlight conversion rollout, that's proceeding well. Martua is basically finished now, so people that live in Martua will be benefiting from the new type of streetlight out there. The biennial footpath condition survey is now underway, I'm told by the acting transportation manager, and so that hopefully with the new technology we're using to do that survey, we'll be picking up the faults a lot quicker than we've previously done. So that's a real step forward in using technology to our advantage. And Bike Month in February was extremely successful, particularly for us as City Council. We achieved a good result in the National Bike Challenge, which was good. A couple of things around Welcome Bay and Great, and I just feel I should mention. Welcome Bay, there's an article in the paper today about it, but we are proceeding with an independent review of options to try and open up Welcome Bay Lane to general traffic as soon as possible. So we have engaged a consultant to help us with that piece of work. In Greaton as well, we've engaged an independent consultant to do a review of the items that were raised at the final Transport Committee not so long ago. So I'm now happy to take questions on the report.
We'll take them page by page. So we'll start with page 28, Asset Planning and Information. Over the page, City Waters. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with regards to the Infrastructure Development Code, it's probably a question through the Chair to Christine Jones. Christine, can you just remind me whether there are amendments being made to the IDC with regards to the matter of trees? We looked at new development out Papamoa, and there were some issues there with the quality of trees, number of trees, spacing and tree species. So has that, or is that being addressed through IDC amendments.
Through the chair, there were some changes that have already been made to the IDC in respect of trees. There was a requirement about 1 tree per lot. That has already been changed. So it should be addressing the issue which was raised by developers some time ago. I think that was done over 6 months ago.
Moving through the waters, infrastructure delivery, which is a list there of all the projects. We have Councillor Mason, then Councillor Stewart.
Page 32 is the those big contracts that are being awarded. That's the first one, the Waiari trunk water mains construction. That's astonishing. That the contract sum of 18.5 million, it ranges from 37.1 to 60. That's extraordinary. And is that right? Is it?
I'll probably hand you over to Howard Severinson to just talk you through that. The information is correct in the table, yes, but Howard would talk you through the process of that project.
And also through the chair, there was a report to council when we were awarding this contract because it was over budget, so that was considered confidential, so we could re-provide you a copy of that report as well. So it has been
I'm short kosher, but I just wanted to ask, I guess really make the point that it's that the capacity is resulting in low numbers of tenders out there for infrastructure provision, and I guess just making the point, but also about the Waiari, the second last one, the Waiari water supply scheme membrane that's come in under budget. So that's just a bit of interesting, potentially about the costing. I don't know if it's a hint or not.
No, through the chair, there have been some interesting situations with some of our tendering, especially in the latter part of 2018. So at times on average we are attracting about 3.9 bidders for our jobs, but sometimes we're down to 2, which was the case on the Waiari trunk mains. There was a very big tender range, so what we've done there is we've essentially chopped the work into 3 sections. We've not awarded 2 of the 3 sections, and we're going back to the market. We've pre-qualified some keen bidders with sharp pencils, but we have been able to negotiate and award the westernmost portion of the works, which will be getting underway next month. In terms of the membranes, it's quite an interesting one that we're a very knowledgeable buyer in the membrane space. We've been running membrane plants since about the turn of the century. So we've had a long discussion with 2 potential suppliers in that space, and we're very pleased with the outcome of those negotiations. So there's some complexity to some of the Waiari contracts, and we're very aware of what the market's telling us when it comes back and through the tender box.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's regarding paragraph 7, water mains break, and also paragraph 4, asset management plans. And my question is, I know some of the older areas in Tauranga have got some very old pipes that need replacing. If I were to look on the internet, would that show me what areas have been done and areas that need doing? Just looking at paragraph 4b there, says there's some information available.
Steve, are you able to speak to that?
Or maybe it's just intranet internally. I'd just like to clarify, please.
Through the chair, Councillor, which paragraph was that you wanted to?
Just with regards to water mains break, which is paragraph 7, and then going back to asset management plans in paragraph 4, it talks about asset management plans have been finalised and they're available on the intranet. Is that correct? So if I looked on there, would it show me what areas of Tauranga need the water pipes being replaced, etc.?
assets are available as a layer on the GIS, spatially available to people to have a look at. But we indicate the age and the location of those assets. In terms of our asset management plans, we're reviewing those continuously and working to sometimes change the order that we renew them, because we might have a higher breakage rate, that comes up, and then we just reprioritize. So we wouldn't indicate those on a year-by-year basis. We try to indicate which areas are going to be done, but for the full 10 years in an asset management plan, we don't indicate every single one.
Do we have a goal to replace so many, meters or whatever per annum, or is it just done on a case-by-case basis?
There's several variables. So it's the breakage rate, which you can correlate with age and condition, but we also obviously know how many breaks we've had and what it's cost us to repair, and so we'll use that information. We'll use the criticality and the vulnerability. So how many people hang off that main, and what will the impact be on the community? The ground conditions, several other things that are coming into that decision. So it's getting a little bit more sophisticated as we move along with the asset management plans.
Councillor Robson.
Just going back to paragraph 10 and the contracts awarded, if in future we could just put memo where the contract award is outside the range of tenders, because it does beg a question. So if you see the first item there, the contract sum, and yet the tenders, obviously it's not within the range, and also on the membrane issue, the contract sum is outside the range of tenders, so it does beg questions. If we can just put a memo line somewhere just to explain that, why that was.
We'll move along. We are now looking at health and safety, which is on page 33 and over the page on 34. Interesting to note that a wasp sting has been recorded. Sustainability and waste. Martin's already talked about the glass curbside collection. So question from Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Stewart.
Just on the curbside, the glass curbside, we won't go to today, but the only way we can really compare if this is a success or not is if we are able to know the figures from last year before we started this, that was going through the transfer stations, and now the combined curbside plus what's still going through transfer. So if we could have those figures at some point in the future, it would be useful.
Yep, I'll talk to the waste team about that. Thank you.
And just through the chair, following up on that topic, what happens to the glass that is collected? Is it recycled, or does it end up in rubbish, or is it sent overseas? It would be helpful.
It's all recycled. It's all recycled.
Recycled in New Zealand?
In Auckland, yeah. All goes up to Auckland and get recycled, yeah.
Picking up on Councillor Baldock's question, so we did the rubbish bag audits, you recall, and so we've got the data from the collection service about how much glass was in rubbish bags, and then post the collection service about how much data is in rubbish bags or bins. So, and that was going straight to landfill. So that's another piece of information in the mix.
Through to hot topic of transportation. Councillor Robson.
Yeah, we're a rapidly growing city. The number of passenger kilometres travelled in the city, I imagine, is increasing at a reasonable rate. I recently heard a regional councillor, Stuart Crosby, quote figures of something like 5%, 7% and 11% increases. I don't know what order they were and whether they were for the most 3 recent years. I haven't seen any evidence to back them up. My point is that when we use crash statistics or any number, we need the right denominator. We need to understand that we're moving. So I'm looking for, can we nuance those figures with per kilometre travelled, or per person on the road, or per vehicle, or per population, per capita? Can we do something so we've got an appropriate base to measure things from? I know the absolute figure is important, but so also is the relative figure.
Yes, we can provide that level of detail. So, yeah, it'll be coming out of the ministry, I suspect, but or NZTA, but we'll have a
through those crash data. Interesting that Friday has the most crashes with rear end and intersection crashes. I'm quite pleased it doesn't break it down to agenda drivers, gender information. So any further questions around LEDs? Oh, sorry. Do you want to give it to transportation? Councillor Morris, then Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Kurek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Three transportation, well, I'll make it two transportation questions. The first is in regard to car parking in Matapihi at the end of the peninsula. Are we able to utilise the reclamation that was put down for the southern pipeline for future car parking? Have we investigated that? Can we investigate that?
Through the chair, that there was the consent for that project was quite explicit that it had to be returned to its original state. And following the hui we had at Matapihi recently around this issue, it's quite clear the community don't want to encourage more car parking into that area. So we're working with them to try and resolve the current issues out there. I don't know whether Carlo wants to elaborate on that comment any further.
I think it was a passionate hui and lots of suggestions put forward that Martin and his team are currently working through. But certainly the position of the Matapihi community is to try and maintain their rural aspect with some consideration for some balance.
Second question through you, Madam Chair, and that's just in regard to road resurfacing, a bit of a perennial one in the new subdivisions of the Mountain Papamoa. I understand the rationale for resurfacing in a fit-for-purpose way rather than like for like. But over the last couple of years, the look of the resurfacing, in my personal view, has been rather unsightly, and it kind of adds, if I speak pejoratively, insult to injury. You've got people who've gone from hot mix to chip seal, and then the quality of the job with scuff marks, and we've said, well, people are screwing their tyres and whatnot, but the quality of the work and the finished product compared to what it was before, yeah, it's never going to be hot mix, but the quality of the chip seal just looks horrible. I know that it's fit for purpose, it's preventing water getting into the base course, and that's appropriate, but it's a bit like Councillor Bill Granger's paint job on his car. It's really rough and ready, and you can't really see yourself in it. So what are we going to do to address that concern? What are we going to do to address that concern? Because there is a visual aspect and there is an amenity aspect to it as well, rather than just the protection of the infrastructure.
My acting transport manager will try and answer the question for you.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, we are taking measures. We're aware of the visual nature, as you say. It's fit for purpose and it meets the specifications, technical specifications, and it's almost like a condition of how we do things. The chip sealing is we use fine chip. We use the right amount of bitumen. We don't get the flushing, but the tyres with the power steering these days does screw it up, particularly at driveways. Often it comes right after time, because the bitumen at the top will oxidise and will wear off with traffic use. So after a year or two, it can be right. However, we have taken measures to review all this over the last few months. One measure is to change the bitumen specification to a more viscous mix, which will adhere to the stone, or the stone will adhere to it a lot better, and that includes adding polymer modified products to it. So that will be kicked into gear next season. I can go into the technical detail, but I don't think you need that. And we certainly are more alert to the quality of the work by the contractor. One of the risks we face is that once the sealing goes down, it's very hard to change it. It's very expensive to remove it. In fact, the only way to fix this is to overlay again, and that can add difficulties as well, and it doesn't necessarily fix the problem. we can just only do our best to, most of it occurs in the parking lane, which is not trafficked very heavily, and that's why the marks appear. However, we get a few complaints, but really not many.
Any final question? Okay. Next is Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, through the chair. That was one of my topics, was hot mix, and I think from conversations I've heard from some elected members that it would be good to review the hot mix versus the chip seal. It's been some time now since we changed over, and I think the learnings from that could be discussed to see how we move forward in the future. So that's one topic. And my other one regards the parking numbers for CBD. A comment about the Saturday free parking seems to have had little impact on the number of vehicles, and I just wonder if that's because we haven't advertised it enough. Even though I should be aware that it's free parking, you tend to forget because there's no sort of reminders, and I wondered if that was perhaps something that could be looked at, Martin.
Through the chair, happy to look at that and work with our communications team on that.
Just in terms of the chip seal level of service, it would be good to get some indication as to whether there was a majority view as to whether that's something you wanted to address, or do you want us to bring that back for a decision through the policy prioritisation list?
We can discuss that at our Wednesday meeting tomorrow, if councillors agree.
Subject. When the decision was made to change from like for like, I don't recall these issues being discussed as a part of the cost. At some point, I mean, this is now 6 years, I think, since that decision was made. At some point, we must be able to get enough financial data to see whether, in fact, this was pound foolish, penny wise, pound foolish, other way around, something like that. But, whether it really was a saving, because that was the whole debate. When we're having to do more to make the chip seal look better and so on, we should review it. I don't know if now is the time, because we want the data to review it, but I agree with the sentiments, really.
Just through the chair, I'd just like to maybe just put a buyer beware on this discussion, that if you went back to the old policy, you won't get any subsidy on that hot mix in the local streets. So just beware where you go with this one.
Thank you for that advice.
Through the chair, if I may.
Is it a same subject?
Yeah, it's all in the same area. It's parking. I just want to note anecdotal evidence from the businesses in the CBD since the free Saturday parking has come in, is that there has been an improved throughput. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Molloy. Councillor Carrick, you had a question?
It's been asked by Councillor Morris regarding Matapi. Thank you.
Thank you. So basically we've come to the end of the transportation issues.
Thank you. Thank you, and through the chair, and a question to Martin Parks. And before I fire the question, there's just a couple of words I do want to say, and don't worry, it's going to lead to a question, Madam Chair. And I think I'm saying this on behalf of the Welcome Bay community. Number one, the slip lane has been closed for six months, and nothing has been done. And as you can see from this morning's paper, how wild some of these residents are, and you cannot blame them. And myself, it's taken me 42 minutes this morning to get from my place to the Tauranga City Council. I'm tempted, to be honest with you, and I don't mind saying this, that if something isn't done in the next couple of weeks, I might help this gentleman, Mr. Ryan, take some of the barriers away, and maybe stand there with a sign myself. It's getting to that stage, so I just thought I'd throw that in. The question I want to ask you, Martin, is that I know this is going to a consultant, but my biggest worry is, okay, how long is this going to take? Have you any idea? Because what I've got to do is answer economy for the things that haven't been.
Through the chair, in response to the question, I can't give you an exact time frame. There's two matters that the consultant has been asked to look at. One is around the ability to open up Welcome Bay Lane temporarily, using temporary setup. The other one is to look at the more permanent solution for not just Welcome Bay Lane, but there are other issues in that area that need to be addressed as well. So we are working with that consultant to see what's possible. The main thing that we need to be mindful of in this room is the safety audit that sits behind all this. Now, the safety audit was quite clear, depending on how the lane is opened up. There's a significant safety issue with regards to the safety of cyclists that has to be addressed. So whether it's temporary or permanent, we've still got to mitigate what's in that safety audit. Because even a temporary solution will have to go through a safety review process, and that takes a bit of time to do that. So it's a piece of work we cannot rush. We want to get it right.
So in response to that, our number one priority is a temporary setup. I'm trying to get something moving as soon as. So that will be number one priority.
We're certainly looking at that, and if we can open it up temporarily, safely, then we will do that while we work on the permanent solution, yes.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, we've got some items to follow up, further information around the tenders and the contracts, the data station, the transfer station data figures, some nuances required around the crash data, elected members to discuss further the like-for-like chip seal, more promoting of the free parking, and we know that those two pieces of work are coming back to us through the CE around Greerton and Welcome Bay. So with that said, can I please have a mover and seconder for DC 65? Councillor Baldock and seconded by Councillor Clout. Speaking to it, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Clout, any commentary around this? Okay, excellent. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? And carried. I'm going to quickly change order of business. What we're going to have to do is, because we want to give priority to the general managers to speak to them, is that we will take one more report, which will be corporate services from Paul, because he's not available this afternoon, and we'll come back to people in engagement and through to infrastructure this afternoon. After policy, so policy should be finished around 3:30, so we'll continue then, and we'll have also Christine's this afternoon. So we'll move now through to Paul's report, which is so to have a mover and second to change the order of business, please. So Councillor Stewart and Councillor Mason, all those in favour, please say aye. Against and carried. Thank you. So we're moving to page 56. It's the General Manager of Corporate Services, Paul Davidson, 17 topics in his paper. We'll try and move through these quite quickly if we can. Thank you, Paul. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, elected members. Just to explain actually what Corporate Services does encompass, given that the title doesn't really give it justice. So it includes finance, digital, legal risk, property, city development, airport, marine and procurement. So as you can see, it's a fairly wide-ranging group of activities. What I'll do is just pick out three of the key highlights for the period to go through, and then take any questions. So in terms of one of the major highlights is the redevelopment of the airport. As you know, late last year we opened phase one of that redevelopment, which was the new arrival gates, Koru Club, and now we're just doing the final work around the departure hall. That will include the introduction of electronic check-in and so forth that you see in the other major airports around the city, and that is intended to be operational mid-April. So just going through the final elements of that at the moment. Also doing some runway rejuvenation at the moment. It is chip seal. It's very fine ship. That's as far as I'll go with that. That's happened over the last couple of weeks. All reports from pilots is that's actually working very, very well, and some good feedback on that. And the other good news at the airport is additional services starting mid-April around Auckland and Wellington. So things are operating well from that particular area. Second area is just to cover off is in terms of digital. 3 major projects going on within digital at the moment, or there's a lot more than 3, but the 3 major projects just to highlight strategic finance. That's work that's currently underway with Auckland Council in terms of actually looking at opportunities and how we can work with them in terms of looking at the replacement of our core financial systems. The other is around our core human resources system and opportunities being looked at there as to how we can use local government, all of government contracts for the deployment of that system, and then some productivity tools that are also being worked on an ongoing basis to help staff effectively improve productivity across the business. And the final area, which Madam Chair touched on in her introduction today, was just in the rating area, and just to highlight 2 things with that. One is the recent billing process, and we're looking at around 98% of rates either being paid or under arrangements as of today, which is consistent with where it's been in the past, marginally down, but given the size of the number of ratepayers is a good outcome. And secondly, just in terms of the citywide reval, as was referred to, 670 objections, very similar to the last time. Of those objections, it's a fairly even split between those that objected for being too high or too low, depending on what people's motivations are in terms of what they're doing with their property. So I'll pass over to any questions.
Got a whole pile of questions. Conscious we'll try to get through them as quick as we can. So rather than go by topic, we'll go by councillor. So first, Councillor Clout.
I'll be very quick. Paragraph 5, they're talking there about changes to the Privacy Act. Can you explain what those changes are, how it might impact on us?
I'll do is I'll get Nick to get a paper together on that, which actually explains what that is in more detail.
Councillor Clout. That's all? Okay, thank you. Councillor Morris.
3 questions with your indulgence, Madam Chair. First one on the VIC and the Provincial Growth Fund funding. I've just found out that Rotorua have received $20 million for their waterfront. We've had a waterfront program which has been planned for a lot longer than theirs, and I think they got another $7 million for Whakarewarewa Forest. So my question is, what are we doing to apply for Provincial Growth Fund funding within our organisation? Because I think we are missing the bus. Notwithstanding Minister Jones's comments about Tauranga apparently being rich, I think that's just one of those comments we can disregard because it's nonsense. What are we doing? Are we making the most of this opportunity here? Because I sense that we're not.
There are a number of things, and those things will continue ongoing. Like one of the VIC project in itself has been repackaged in terms of that application, and looking at really addressing some of the issues that came through in terms of the first round of applications. And we'll continue to look at other opportunities that actually exist within there, with the learnings that have happened through the previous applications. But you're correct in terms of that. It is hard to actually get those applications through.
Look, Madam Chair, just on provincial growth funding, I think we need a wider conversation with the CE on that. I think we're missing the bus, missing the funding. Second question, with your indulgence, on Manu Park. That's the shortened version, according to me. What remediation options are going to be presented to us? Some time ago there was a review into this process as well as Greerton and so on, and part of that is why we've got this committee here today. But what or when are we going to have some potential remediation options brought to Council on that project?
That report has been commissioned through the Chief Executive to come back. That is in the final stages of completion, and then will be brought back to Council. I don't know if I've got a date for that as yet, but it's soon.
Thirdly and briefly, the Mowal Base Track, in my view, this is the second most important project in the city behind transportation. When are we receiving an update in terms of the tender situation there and some ways forward, because we need to get on with it?
Through the chair, that's on the 16th of April council meeting.
Okay, so we have Councillor Courik, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Robson, Councillor Mason.
Two questions. Firstly, airport. I noticed there's a confidential attachment to this report around the numbers of arrivals, departures, etc. Now, this was discussed quite some time ago around the rationale for that. Could you just remind this council as to why it's confidential, please?
The reason is that they're actually Air New Zealand passenger numbers, commercially sensitive to Air New Zealand.
Just in terms of providing information to the wider public or the industry who could potentially look at servicing Tauranga and introducing some competition, it would be helpful that that's actually public information. Has there been any discussion with Air New Zealand or other discussion in terms of getting TCC getting its own numbers to make that available?
We could have the conversation again, but Air New Zealand are clear in terms of what is information that belongs to effectively their operation.
Has the cost been quantified in terms of TCC or the airport obtainance or keeping a record of arrivals and departures? To me, it doesn't seem to, wouldn't be a big job.
No, it hasn't.
Could we do that? Could we entertain some discussion around that? I think it's quite important that we actually have some information on the on that airport in terms of providing information.
Through you, Madam Chair, what suggest take it offline and we can have the conversation with Air New Zealand in terms of options.
Thank you. The other issue is on page 59, Mission Street. Now, just informal discussion with elected members, there is some concern around the material that's going out with the consultation process, and there's a view that we could wish to hold back on that consultation. If the direction of this council was to put that consultation process on hold, subject to some informal discussion about the way forward, would that require a resolution of the council?
Yes, it would. There's a current resolution that work is being worked in accordance with, so it would require a resolution to change it.
So, Madam Chair, could I propose a resolution?
Of course not. You need to bring a notice of motion if you want to do a reversal of a decision like that.
Sorry, are you the chairman, Councillor Baldock? You're the chairman. So, Madam Chair, could I propose a resolution to put to this committee?
You can, because it's just putting something on hold. It's not a change of direction.
Okay. So the resolution I'd like this committee to consider is simply that we put the current consultation process on hold, subject to informal discussion by elected members on the way forward.
We have a seconder for that. Actually, we'll just get some advice from Christine, just to see.
Through the chair, I'm just thinking in terms of this is a formal resolution, and so you're linking a formal resolution to an informal discussion. I think you would be better to either specify a date or a meeting date where the matter will be reconsidered, because otherwise you're referring to a non-public process, which I don't think is probably the appropriate thing. So you could go to, and the matter be until a date, which could be a subsequent council meeting, like the 16th of April council meeting. That may be an appropriate time if you wish to then have
advice. Thank you, Christine. So it would be subject to consideration by council at its 16 April meeting.
Councillor Carrick, do you have a seconder for that?
No, sorry, I don't.
I'm just going to put up on the screen so you can read it, and then we'll look for a seconder, and then we can speak to it if it gets a seconder. So do we have someone to second that? Want of a seconder? Councillor Robson, seconder. Do you like to speak to it, Councillor Carrick?
Thank you, Councillor Robson. I think...
Sorry, just point of order. We haven't finished all the questions on the report. If this resolution is going to be part of the receiving of the report, I wonder if we could continue with questions before we debate the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. We will continue with questions and we can come back to that if that's right with you, Councillor Carrick. Thank you. So further questions, next on the list was Councillor Stewart, then Robson, then Mason, then we'll look to wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Te Papa o ngā manu poru takataka. On the 6th of September last year, at a briefing update, elected members were advised there would be more grass than concrete. So my question is, through the Chair, will the remediation report take this into account when it comes back to elected members?
Through the Chair, the report that will come back is really looking at the four projects in terms of the key learnings that are coming out of that, and it will include addressing some of those issues. But it won't be directly addressing that, no.
And my other question is on page 58, paragraph 12E. It says, quote, "Car rego looking for rangers at the falls," and that didn't seem to make sense. So if someone could clarify what that means, please. Paragraph 12E.
Yeah, it just means that the park rangers, rather than actually having to go to a tent site and physically ID the card, can now do that based on the registration number. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Robson.
Apologies to the Chair, I have a number of questions. I'll start from the beginning and try and work through this in some order. Legal and risk update, so paragraphs 4 and 5, would it be possible to get an indication of what the costs are for addressing those Lagoima issues? Staff time, times the cost obviously will give us a... And if there are anomalies or outliers in terms of members of the community who are, if in effect be imposing significant cost, could that also be highlighted? Another question to staff in relation to that topic. If someone puts in a Lagoima request, do we provide the facility where they can offer to pay for it up front? Is there anything that stops us doing that? So if someone says, I want to put in a Lagoima request, but I'm more than happy to pay for the staff time it requires, is there anything to stop us allowing that provision, facilitating that payment?
With the Chair, and Jacinta's just left, so in terms of the first part of the question, the cost estimate and further information, we can get that information to you. In terms of the second part of the question, I wouldn't be aware of anything that would stop us being able to do that if anyone wanted to do it.
Having been in that situation, currently in that situation, and probably going to be in that situation potentially after the election, I don't want to impose costs on the council unnecessarily. I think that provision should be available for people. perhaps like the voluntary rate account that won't have many contributors. However, I'd like that point noted. On procurement fleet management, and this is, we had a car effectively gifted to council. It was an electric car at a cost of some $38,000. Has there been an analysis done on the value of running electric cars versus petrol cars? I mean, this plays to green, it plays to, you know, sustainability, looking after ratepayers' money, looking after the environment. Has there been any analysis done, given the car was provided free of charge? Has someone run a ruler over it to decide whether it was a dumb idea or there's actually some value in someone potentially doing it again after the election?
So through the chair, not specifically, however, we are looking at different fleet options as part of the replacement, which includes part of that analysis.
Thank you.
Recommend to the donor that a hybrid would be a better option.
Thank you for that advice. On Te Papa Ona Manu Poratakataka, I asked a question earlier. I don't know whether it was answered. It was suggested that it was more appropriate to ask it in this environment. There is a sign saying there will be 4 large native trees. My question is, are they going to be large on arrival or large after 50 years? It does make a difference.
Bridget, to answer that question.
Good afternoon, through the chair. The answer is yes to both. So they will be large specimen trees on arrival, and they will get bigger as well. So just to give you an indication, if you'd like some detail, there's a large kowhai tree, one large kowhai tree, 160 litre tree. That's a root bag size, and they grow to about 4 or 5 metres in height. There'll be 2 puriri trees, 2,000 litre size. That's considerable trees that the average person doesn't sort of pick up and take home and plant. Obviously, those get to about 6 or 9 metres in height. And they'll be large on arrival as well. And one Pohutakawa tree, 2,000 litres as well, root ball size.
The numbers, the metrics unfortunately don't mean a lot to me. Will they provide shade on arrival? And at what point will they provide shade?
Yes, they will provide shade on arrival and increase, and I can provide more information offline if
Thank you. Tremendously broad area, as you pointed out in your introduction. The city, according to some lights, is booming. One assumes, therefore, there's a tremendous demand for land in the city. It appears to be the case we've run out of residential land. However, in our CBD, there is a significant amount of land that doesn't seem to have much demand for it. Specifically, in relation to land owned by council, have we had any approaches by anyone to do something with that land? I'm thinking of Devonport Road, Durham Street. Have we had any approaches over the last, whatever seems appropriate period, from anyone to do something with that land?
Through the chair, I think there may have been an approach to the CEO on one piece of land, and I could perhaps cover that in confidential, but I'm not aware of any others.
I suppose my point being that while the city is short of residential land, it doesn't look like there's a tremendous demand for land inside the CBD. For whatever reason, probably the market doesn't quite match some people's aspirations. That's enough for today, but thank you.
So Councillor Mason, Morris and then Stewart, and then we are wrapping up. As lunch is cold, we have people coming in at 1 p.m. We're going to adjourn the meeting and carry on after lunch, but we need to wrap up Paul's report prior to 12:30.
Quick question,
so we'll
page.
carry on to Councillor Mason next. Thank you.
Page 57, the paragraph 8, the net promoter score in the reporting period. So what are we actually measuring? Is it the internal customer or external? Or just give us a bit of information. A nice big increase, but what are we measuring?
Through the chair, we're measuring external NPS, so community NPS rather than internal NPS, and we're measuring that across 9 different functions at the moment, which is continuing to expand as we add more onto it, and there'll be a detailed report coming specifically on that topic in the next meeting, I believe.
Councillor Morris, quickly please.
Thank you. 11 Mission Street, there's been a foreshadowed motion. If elected members were of the mind that they wanted to view and give feedback to the consultation material, would they be able to do that without resolution?
To bring up too earlier, I won't need to go back, but the consultation going on with the Memorial Park, we might see that information too, if we could, that's going out to the...
I've noted that. Not yet. We have two quick questions from Councillor Granger and Correct, then we're wrapping up.
Yeah, Bridget, come forward. Look, as regards to the Welcome Bay supermarket, could you tell me, has there or will there be information out to the public in regards to what the TCC are doing at the moment? And we're talking about the likes of looking at private land options and also the reserve land. I feel that the community does need some form of information.
Through the chair, I acknowledge there seems to have been community interest since the matter was reported to the last Urban Form and Transport Committee meeting. The intention was to complete the comprehensive site options analysis, including the possibility of the use of private land, and report that back to council in an open meeting. And that's the current intent of making information available in this initial investigation stage.
I know exactly what's going to happen there, but before that does, and we're talking about June when it does come back, I just want some information to go out to the public. The thing is that they just want to know what is happening. Could that possibly be done?
Yes, through the chair, we can work with our communications team to update the community.
Councillor Correct. Councillor Stewart? No? Okay, so are you still comfortable for your amendment to be included in the resolution?
My comfort is uncertain, but let's go. No, at a recent public forum...
Just a moment, we just need to move, and you need to get a seconder first.
Oh, we've done that.
You've got Councillor Robson, you happy to second? Okay, so you need to speak to that.
So at a recent public forum, we had a number of very motivated speakers in opposition to the proposed transfer at Mission Street. From that and the information provided, I've shifted my support for it, because my concern is that we're uncertain of the material that's going to go out for consultation, and I think even regardless of that, this is a very sensitive issue. There's potential here to create angst and hurt in the community through this process. I recollect the process that the Western Bay Council went through in terms of its discussion through the community consultation around having a dedicated Maori seat. And so that sits behind my concern. And I'd certainly like to put the current process on hold, because I think it's imminent in terms of when it's going out, and to have a good discussion, a rediscussion subsequent to that public forum and the points raised, and give it further thought, and that's where I'm at.
No, we'd like to speak to it. Okay, open for discussion. Councillor Mason?
Yep, I think the Chief Executive said to us on question that he would work with Communications Department. There was going to be a draft drawn up, and then we would be able to look at that, and it would go out. So I think I don't see the reason why we're interfering with that process. It's we're looking at all aspects of the community, and this is the process is going forward as it should.
Mayor, can I ask you to speak to what you know where we are on the timeline with this documentation, please?
Through the Chair, we provided the Chief Executive with all of the consultation material and a revised timetable last week. It was my understanding that that was going to be forwarded to you. In that document, I clearly outlined the communications principles that have been applied to that material, so you can see what the underlying decision making, was. One of the clear principles we put in place was to acknowledge and the feedback we'd already received from elected members on the content and look and feel of that material. So you will see it reflected, your feedback reflected in that, in the collateral. At this stage, all of that has been put on hold until you come back to us. So we are not planning to go out to consultation until April, when you've seen that material and you have given us the okay to actually start the consultation. We do have control over that date, but we would need to let the community know that things are being delayed, because in the last council meeting we did confirm it would be in March, and obviously that's not going to happen now.
Okay, with that in mind, it's obviously it's been verbalised, but I think it's really important to see if we can get this through to formalise that it is on hold, it's sending a signal to the community and for clarity for elected members. So, Councillor Clerk.
What I heard, and thank you, it's on hold subject to the matter, the collateral, the material that's going out for consultation, but the consultation is going to happen. So this resolution is proposing potentially, further than that, potentially we might decide not to consult and default back to the current position where it just gets transferred to the arms. That's why the later formal discussion would provide that opportunity. So, other members.
Sorry, through the chair, the resolution was for us to consult. So yes, that you are right, Rick, it is on hold subject to the collateral being seen. However, the resolution is to consult.
If I can just clarify, so there is a resolution to consult that we're working through. It's taking a little bit longer to get the information together. You've asked to see that information prior to it going public, but if there were no such resolution as what's currently proposed, then the expectation is that that information would be out in the public arena prior to the 16th of April council meeting, as I understand it. If you don't want that to occur, then you'd need to provide us direction, which then would mean that staff would prepare a report under that scenario of this resolution being passed, would prepare a report to the 16th of April council meeting seeking a further direction as to whether you wish staff to proceed with consultation or for consultation not to occur.
We'll take questions, Councillor Baldock. Any questions? Questions, Councillor Granger?
Question back to the staff again. Amy, just in regards to the consultation, I understand, tell me if I'm wrong, that we had extended that from 2 weeks to 4 weeks?
That's not my understanding, sorry. We're at this stage, the time frame of 2 weeks was still in place, but we could extend to 4. I don't see any reasons that that time frame we can work with you on.
We'll continue discussion. Certainly, Councillor Robson.
How would the motion as it's current, or the B as it's currently drafted, how would that be interpreted by staff? Because I'm just trying to understand whether the motivation and the intent of the mover is reflected in the words and would be understood by staff in that way. Because the way it's currently read, that the consultation process is going to be considered, not the consultation collateral, and they are different topics. And then of course there's also the substantive issue, which I fear is actually at the root of much of this, how can one put it, exhibition of governance by this group. So how would that motion be interpreted by staff?
The way I would envisage it would be interpreted is that we would not continue with the consultation process. Currently we've got a resolution on the books that says consult with this matter. We would halt that, it would sit in abeyance, and then you would reconsider, and when that report comes to council, you could pass whatever resolution you wish in respect to the overall matter of Mission Street in consultation. And so then we would get revised instructions and we would implement whatever that was.
Can I get clarification? If the doesn't address the substantive issue, which I believe is really what this topic is about, can one actually move a motion in relation to that in that meeting? I just want to clarify that.
So as long as the topic is on the agenda, which is Mission Street,
okay,
you can put forward a resolution. If there's no report on the matter or no topic on the agenda, then you're unable to pass a resolution on that matter unless it's
just didn't want to be in a situation where the substantive issue arises at a council meeting and it's pointed out that the report relates to consultation or to collateral and not to the substantive issue. So for that clarification, I'm happy to keep my seconding in place.
Okay. There's no further questions. I will take it in parts. So we have A receiving DC 67. It's been moved by Councillor Currick and seconded by Councillor Robson. Oh, sorry, I did ask for questions in discussion. Okay, sure.
Yeah,
so Councillor Baldock, Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'd still like to speak to it. I think it is a mistake to support this at this point. There is an opportunity for the Chief Executive to slow the process down and enable us to give feedback to the material that's going out, which is one issue of some concern. But it's clear from Councillor Carrack's explanations that his intention is more likely to try and stop the process. We resolved to do so. We placed it in the hands of the Chief Executive. We had, a pretty clear demonstration from those who came into the chamber at that time what their view was, but we have not heard from the community. I think to stop it is Councillor Carrack talks about being worried about angst and hurt in the community. I hate to think what it'll do to iwi in this regard, that we go and then we stop, and we haven't even asked the community to give us their feedback, and I think we could be surprised. I don't think this is an issue around Maori wards, which Western Bay experiences. It's a very different issue. There are a lot of different factors. I believe we should just allow the community to come and speak to us and make our final decisions after that consultation, and I hope other members will take the same view.
Any further comments? Councillor Morris?
I do wonder if we would be so quick to do a resolution like this if we were talking about cycleways and we got an impassioned plea from a resident came in and said, no, I don't like cycleways in front of my house, and then all of a sudden we stopped the entire process of consulting with the community because one person came in. I acknowledge some of the discussion around hurt because I think that some people in our community thrive on race baiting. I think that is a fact. I think that some people in our community race bait with a thin veneer of an equality argument, and as somebody who passionately believes in equality, I find that incredibly offensive because it does no service to the argument of equality. When you have people who genuinely wish to race bait and they use that as an excuse, it really is a disservice. In terms of this topic here, the ground has changed. I am aware informally that two of my colleagues at least have changed their minds after the public forum the other day. I don't think that they should be scared of the public. I think that they should hear from the entire community. Don't be afraid. Have the discussion. This question of whether, again, and I do struggle with it, I do acknowledge it, do you cause more damage if a couple of colleagues have changed their minds at this early stage and clearly the thing is not going to get through? Do you cause more damage out there? But do you actually encourage the sort of, and I'm going to term it race baiting, by hightailing it now? Do you actually do a greater disservice to the community by not having the conversation, by turning and running now? My mind is wide open on this. Yeah.
Councillor Clout.
Yeah, shorter version would be just to say, look, let's have the consultation, then we'll make up our mind after that. Thank you.
Noting this is just a pause. Councillor Malloy.
Yeah, certainly can't support B. The way I see it, it's potentially designed to stop the process altogether, and I would not support that. I think we follow through the consultation process and see what happens.
Other speakers? Councillor Robson. No, you've reserved, so if you wish to speak.
Yeah, speaking to it, I haven't changed my position, although I'm more than happy and have always been in favour of this inter-community consultation. If people have changed their position, I agree with Councillor Morris. They should front rather than circumlocute and equivocate and find a way of avoiding facing that change. So in that sense, I will be voting against B if it's put in parts. But I very much wanted to allow this debate to happen in the chamber so colleagues had an opportunity to place positions on public record. I will be voting against B, but I think some points have been well made, particularly by Councillor Morris, about if you change your position, own it.
So no further comments. Right of reply, Councillor Curick.
Councillor Robson, I'm certainly owning it. That's why I moved this resolution, and I did say that I have changed my position. But, you know, the objective of this is to, and I'm not afraid of consultation. I'm afraid of the result, or what that consultation will end up as in terms of the community outcome. The community outcome I'm anticipating is a negative one in terms of the relationship between Maori and non-Maori, as I alluded to in terms of the Western Bay situation. I think iwi in itself, they are aware of, you know, from previous consultations of that concern, and I think that there would be a high, reasonably high level of support if from iwi around, you know, what'll end up as damage and no benefit. Because if we get a high level of opposition from the community, I think as a council it's likely that we'll change the current position in terms of it being transferred to Otamataha Trust, and it will revert back to the Elms. But in getting there, as I said before, in getting there, we will create this damage, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Okay, as discussed, we'll take this in parts. So first of all, we'll take A, which is just to receive the report. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? And carried. So in terms of B.
Can I just make a quick point? I just noticed our manager there moving for his microphone. I wonder if Carlo has any comment to make before we vote. It just may be appropriate with your indulgence, Madam Chair.
Kia ora tātou, I appreciate the opportunity to make a couple of comments. The first I would make is I actually reviewed the public forum not long ago and made a few notes, and it was a difficult exercise, I must say, but what I would encourage you to do is to do a quick Google search on the Otamataha Trust. There were some very strong claims in that public forum about not being able to find anything about profiles of trustees and deeds of trust and those sorts of things, but you'll very quickly find with our friend Mr. Google that there's a lot of information very directly involved there. And the second thing I'd encourage you to do is do the same exercise for the group that was presenting that day, and see what you find out. So all I want to do is to encourage you, because I know it was a very passionate discussion that day, and I have said to a few people openly, people are only looking to protect their history, but you as a group have a very difficult but very important task to be able to determine how we actually bring those truths to light. And it was very heartbreaking knowing there was a lot of tangata whenua in that group who were being referred to and about who didn't have an opportunity to speak back on that day. But please, have a look back on that meeting, work your way through the submissions that were made, and if you take a few steps in that research, I think you'll come to a very quick conclusion about the accuracy of some of the things that were raised that day. What I would say to assist you as best as possible is that from a tangata whenua point of view, they're absolutely strongly putting forward cases of helping to advance what tauranga can look like in the future. And the worst thing that they can do is not ask a question. And I think tangata whenua have been patiently waiting on the sidelines for many years for things to happen, but you never get something you never ask for. And so, you know, in my experience, tangata whenua have been told no, or they've been pushed to the side in many different cases. But if you never ask, you never get. In this case, what I see in front of us is an opportunity still to achieve everything that the council wanted to achieve in partnership with the Elms. There's just an extra partner that's there that can be recognised their place in history as well. So I understand and respect that protective nature that we may have, but please think carefully about this one, because sometimes we need to be brave to allow questions to be asked. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Carly, for that perspective. Okay, so we're on to B, and I'll call all those in favour. Please raise your hands and say aye. We have Councillor Kurek. All those against, please raise your hands. So that's Councillor Baldock, Morris, Stewart, Mason, Clout, Granger, Kurek. Sorry, apologies, Malloy, Robson and Brown. So that is lost. Okay, thank you. We've got there to the end of the corporate services report. We will adjourn the meeting. You have 10 minutes for lunch. So lunch may be divided into lunch and afternoon tea. And then we'll be back here at 1 o'clock sharp for policy. Apologies for the long meeting.